Look at that. I am live. And my hair is kind of doing its thing. That's good. If I can... Yeah, I can wiggle down a bit. I've got lights now. I've got a light and a diffuser, and it's working amazingly well. And I did my first wash and set last night. That's why I have old lady hair. But I didn't have setting lotion because we don't have that in New Zealand apparently. I used mousse. I didn't have any toothpicks, so I used bobby pins. And I still have a dent on my head from sleeping in a wig cap all night to keep the bobby pin curls where they should be. But it didn't hurt. It just wasn't uncomfortable at all to sleep in a bunch of bobby pin curls under a wig cap. Not uncomfortable at all. Very weird. Is that okay? It's a little bit darker. Or is it? I don't know. Anyway, that was what I did yesterday. So, hello. So, I need to... Actually... That is... Yeah. You guys are not getting the direct light from the lamp. There. Hi, Danny. I may ask you to help me make my lighting system a little bit better. But apart from that, things are going all right for the stream. It's sort of... Oh, now you can see it a little bit. Whoop. That's better. Yeah, that's better. Awesome. I have no idea about angles and things. I'm not a spatial brain person. Actually, I could learn. I'm just being... Thank you. I did a wash and set, and I came out of it with old lady hair. So I was like, I'm leaning into this. I'm going full vintage. Otherwise, I was looking like the Queen, like how she looks now. Thank you, Evelyn. It's incredible, isn't it? To think that this incredibly glamorous specimen hasn't had a shower in 11 days. No, I have. I've had a shower within the last 11 days. I have. Okay, recap. In the recap, Justine, who was the other pretty girl that the Frankensteins adopted because she was too pretty to live with poor people, she was accused of the murder of baby William Frankenstein because the the cameo portrait of Mother Frankenstein that he was wearing. Oh yeah, awesome. Do that, definitely. Yep. I will do my best for D&D. Sorry. Can't promise anything because I am at the whims of myself. It's the only person who can really piss me off. Me. Thank you. Devil's not getting my sneezes. So Justine has been framed for the murder of Babby William because he was out. Thank you. You too. He was out unattended, not being watched by anyone apparently, wearing a little miniature of Mama Frankenstein, and he was found strangled to death. The little miniature was found among Justine's belongings. Police work then was not great. So they gave her a trial, which was basically, are we going to hang her? And Elizabeth Lavenza was like, no, because her and me are lesbians together. That's canon that we have decided on in chat as a group. But the judge was like, no, I'm sorry, that's not a good enough reason. And they hanged Justine. Meanwhile, Victor Frankenstein, he is still very much 21 years old. Yay! Oh no! They hanged her. She died. Yeah, and then she's like, well, I mean, I didn't do it, but I guess when I go to heaven, I can see William again. And Victor Frankenstein is like, I'm 21 years old, and this is absolutely all about me. I mean, it sucks for her to get murdered, essentially, by the justice system. That's real sad for her and everything. And she's, every time someone remembers their name, they're going to be like, oh, didn't she kill that little boy? But actually, it's worse for me because she's in heaven now, presumably not being hanged. And I'm here on Earth and I feel super guilty. And like Elizabeth's really upset because it was her adopted brother as well. And also she was lesbians with Justine, which I don't know about because I'm Victor Frankenstein. But like she doesn't really understand how guilty I am for all of this. So it is actually worse for me. Victor is 21 years old and the tragedy that happened to some other people is actually worse for him. That's basically the recap. What's up, Josh? His hair is kind of amazing though. Like it just, you can brush it. I've been brushing it all morning. That curl does not come out. I don't know what it looks like at the back. There are some things we're not meant to know. So, he is the real victim here. Yes. He has never questioned for a second, as you guys pointed out last time, that his creature is the one responsible for the death because he thinks he saw him earlier on. Yeah, he's got a lot of growing up to do. So we are going to start now. I've got a busy day. I have to be on the internet in a different place later on. Frankenstein, Chapter 9. Nothing is more painful to the human mind than after the feelings have been worked up by a quick succession of events, the dead calmness of inaction and certainty which follows and deprives the soul both of hope and fear. Justine died, she rested, and I was alive. He's a scientist, he's a genius. The blood flowed freely in my veins, but a weight of despair and remorse pressed on my heart which nothing could remove. Sleep fled from my eyes. I wandered like an evil spirit, for I had committed deeds of mischief beyond description, horrible, and more, much more, I persuaded myself, was yet behind. Yet my heart overflowed with kindness and the love of virtue. He's still finding himself. I had begun life with benevolent intentions and thirsted for the moment when I should put them in practice and make myself useful to my fellow beings. Now all was blasted. I'm sorry, I'm trying not to take this tone when I read his 21-year-old self-pity, but it's hard. It's hard not to. Which means that I am actually the real victim here, even more so than Victor. All was blasted. Instead of that serenity of conscience which allowed me to look back upon the past with self-satisfaction and from thence to gather promise of new hopes, I was seized by remorse and the sense of guilt, which hurried me away to a hell of intense tortures such as no language can describe. I mean, if this were coming from Mary Shelley herself, I would not read it in that tone because she actually did go through a lot, but come on, Victor. This state of mind preyed upon my health, which had perhaps never entirely recovered from the first shock it had sustained. I shunned the face of man. All sound of joy or complacency was torture to me. Solitude was my only consolation. Deep, dark, death-like solitude. Okay. My father observed with pain the alteration perceptible in my disposition and habits, and endeavoured by arguments deduced from the feelings of his serene, conscious, and guiltless life, to inspire me with fortitude and awaken in me the courage to dispel the dark cloud which brooded over me. He's just assuming his dad has no dark secrets. Do you think, Victor, said he, that I do not suffer also? No one could love a child more than I loved your brother. Tears came into his eyes as he spoke. But is it not a duty to the survivors that we should refrain from augmenting their unhappiness by an appearance of immoderate grief? It is also a duty owed to yourself, for excessive sorrow prevents improvement or enjoyment, or even the discharge of daily usefulness, without which no man is fit for society. This advice, although good, was totally inapplicable in my case. I should have been the first to hide my grief and console my friends if remorse had not mingled its bitterness and terror its alarm with my other sensations. Now I could only answer my father with a look of despair and endeavour to hide myself from his view. He is being a bit of a fuckboy at the moment, yeah. And from what I remember all the way through. Yeah. His dad's calling him out for it. He's like, look, having issues with daily useful discharge? Why, perhaps that's why my husband left me. Do you see all those ads for like Lysol, like bleach, vagina products from the 50s, where these women are sitting down and they're like, well, it's a difficult subject to broach, but your husband's going to leave you because you're not putting enough bleach in your downstairs. And the lady's like, ever since I've started putting bleach in my downstairs, my husband can't get enough of it. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? And then it would show her husband with like this big bleached skin all over his mouth area. I don't know what that was about, but they seemed happy. No, that last panel didn't happen. It should have. Answering my father with a look of despair and endeavour to hide myself from his view makes me think of a dog who's knocked over a pot plant. He's just like, and then he's crawling under the house, just to be alone and sorry for what he's done. God, I gotta get through this or Danny won't get her nap. About this time, we retired to our house at Liveread. This change was particularly agreeable to me. The shutting of the gates regularly at 10 o'clock and the impossibility of remaining on the lake after that hour had rendered our residence within the walls of Geneva very irksome to me. I was now free. Often, after the rest of the family had retired for the night, I took the boat and passed many hours upon the water. He keeps forgetting that there is a homicidal creation out there who hates him enough to kill his brother and frame Justine. And he's like, oh, God. Thank God we're out of that walled city that is patrolled regularly. Time for me to go out on the lake at night by myself. We know not to do that now because of Friday the 13th, etc. Sleepaway camp. So it passed many hours upon the water. Sometimes, with my sails set, I was carried by the wind, and sometimes after rowing into the middle of the lake, I left the boat to pursue its own course and gave way to my own miserable reflections. I was often tempted, when all was at peace around me, and I the only unquiet thing that wandered restless in a scene so beautiful and heavenly, if I, except some bat or the frogs, whose harsh and interrupted croaking was heard only when I approached the shore, often, I say, I was tempted to plunge into the silent lake, that the waters might close over me and my calamities forever. But I was restrained when I thought of the heroic and suffering Elizabeth, whom I tenderly loved and whose existence was bound up in mine. I thought also of my father and surviving brother. Should I, by my base desertion, leave them exposed and unprotected to the malice of the fiend whom I had let loose among them? He's an idiot genius. Going for a waltz on Murder Lake, Frankenstein, or the modern camp counselor. He keeps remembering about the creature at very strange moments. At these moments, I wept bitterly and wished that peace would revisit my mind, only that I might afford them consolation and happiness. But that could not be. Remorse extinguished every hope. I had been the author of unalterable evils, and I lived in daily fear lest the monster whom I had created should perpetrate some new wickedness. I had an obscure feeling that all was not over, and that he would still commit some signal crime, which by its enormity should almost efface the recollection of the past. There was always scope for fear so long as anything I loved remained behind. True. My abhorrence of this fiend cannot be conceived. When I thought of him, I gnashed my teeth, my eyes became inflamed, and the light that you shine can be seen? That's where the lyrics come from? No, it isn't. No. I gnashed my teeth, my eyes became inflamed, and I ardently wished to extinguish that life which I had so thoughtlessly bestowed. Yeah, I misread that because I'm always thinking about Kiss from a Rose. Always, 24/7. Waking, sleeping. Hey, Panasgam. Glad you're here. Um, when I reflected on his crimes and malice, my hatred and revenge burst all bounds of moderation. I would have made a pilgrimage to the highest peak of the Andes, could I, when there, have precipitated him to their base. I wished to see him again, that I might wreak the utmost extent of abhorrence on his head and avenge the deaths of William and Justine. Sorry, I'm being super dramatic with this now because I can't help it. Victor is so in love with his own... all of that. Yes, Kiss from a Rose is why I describe myself as spiritual. Just for that song. That's it. Our house was the house of mourning. My father's health was deeply shaken by the horror of the recent events. Elizabeth was sad and desponding. She no longer took delight in her ordinary occupations. All pleasure seemed to her sacrilege toward the dead. Eternal woe and tears she then thought was the just tribute she should pay to innocence so blasted and destroyed. She was no longer that happy creature who in earlier youth wandered with me on the banks of the lake and talked with ecstasy of our future prospects. The first of these sorrows which are sent to wean us from the earth had visited her, and its dimming influence quenched her dearest smiles. He's so dramatic. Edgar had no chance with that lot, but he would have just cleared off completely if Victor Frankenstein had come on. The sorrows which are sent to wean us from the earth. It's a nice way of wean. I love literature. Yeah, it's kind of my brand, I think. But yeah, it's an interesting way to look at like tragedies that happen throughout your life. All of them make you give less of a shit about the world until you're like 100 years old and God's like, do you want to come to heaven? And you're like, fuck it. I don't care. I don't understand anything happening around me. Everyone I know died. I don't really have much going on. When I reflect, my dear cousin, said she, on the miserable death of Justine Moritz, I no longer see the world and its works as they before appeared to me. Before I looked upon the accounts of vice and injustice that I read in books or heard from others as tales of ancient days or imaginary evils. At least they were remote and more familiar to reason than to the imagination. But now misery has come home, and men appear to me as monsters thirsting for each other's blood. This is a privileged white feminism.txt. Yeah, it's the first thing that made her want to ring the police. Yet I'm certainly unjust. Everybody believed that poor girl to be guilty, and if she could have committed the crime for which she suffered, assuredly she would have been the most depraved of human creatures. For the sake of a few jewels, to have murdered the son of her benefactor and friend, a child whom she had nursed from its birth and appeared to love as if it had been her own. I could not consent to the death of any human being, but certainly I should have thought such a creature unfit to remain in the society of men. But she was innocent. I know and I feel that she was innocent. You are of the same opinion, and that confirms me. Alas, Victor, when falsehood can look so like the truth, who can assure themselves of certain happiness? I feel as if I were walking on the edge of a precipice, towards which thousands are crowding and endeavouring to plunge me into the abyss. William and Justine were assassinated, and the murderer escapes. He walks about the world free and perhaps respected. But even if I were condemned to suffer on the scaffold for the same crimes, I would not change places with such a wretch. I listened to this discourse with the extremest agony. I, not in deed, but in effect, was the true murderer. Elizabeth read my anguish in my countenance, and kindly taking my hand, said, "My dearest friend, you must calm yourself. These events have affected me, God knows how deeply, but I am not so wretched as you are. There is an expression of despair and sometimes of revenge in your countenance that makes me tremble. I can't help making fun of them with my tone. I'm just going to choose to believe you guys like it because it's not going to stop probably. Dear Victor, banish these dark passions." Oh God, the dialogue's amazing. I love it. Non-ironically, I love it. "Remember the friends around you who centre all their hopes in you. Have we lost the power of rendering you happy? Ah, while we love, while we are true to each other, here in this land of peace and beauty, your native country, we may reap every tranquil blessing. What can disturb our peace?" Weird words of comfort. I mean, we all love each other, which is great. And we're in Switzerland or wherever we are. And that's great too. What could possibly disturb our peace? I mean, you have another brother, but it's not likely to happen twice. Yeah, no. She was like, "I was in love with that woman, and I'm not as upset as you are." No one is as upset as Victor. And could not such words from her whom I fondly prized before every other gift of fortune suffice to chase away the fiend that lurked in my heart? Even as she spoke, I drew near to her, as if in terror, lest at that very moment the destroyer had been near to rob me of her. Yeah, you love someone more than Elizabeth. His name is Henry Clerval, and we've already heard all about him. Thus, not the tenderness of friendship, nor the beauty of earth, nor of heaven could redeem my soul from woe. The very accents of love were ineffectual. I was encompassed by a cloud which no beneficial influence could penetrate. The wounded deer, dragging its fainting limbs to some untrodden brake, there to gaze upon the arrow which had pierced it, and to die, was but a type of me. This sentence is incredible. 21, and he has feelings. He's thinking about a wounded deer who just wants to be alone to look at the arrow that had pierced it and then die. And that deer is me. So if like any girls want to message me, I probably shouldn't be alone right now. He is the saddest man in Europe. Yeah. Yeah, he's the mentally sick man of Europe. Also, I didn't say hello to you and by name, Alex, but hello. I'm glad you're here. Sometimes I could cope with the sullen despair that overwhelmed me, but sometimes the whirlwind passions of my soul drove me to seek, by bodily exercise and by change of place, some relief from my intolerable sensations. It was during an access of this kind that I suddenly left my home, and bending my steps towards the near alpine valleys, sought in the magnificence, the eternity of such scenes, to forget myself and my ephemeral, because human, sorrows. My wanderings were directed towards the valley of Chamonix. Sounds like an Asterix character, but okay. I had visited it frequently during my boyhood. 6 years had passed since then. Oh, my boyhood. All 6 years ago. I remember it fondly, as if a bubble. Carrying a dream. 6 years ago? Come on, Victor. Get your shit together. Sorry, 6 years had passed since then. I was a wreck, but naught had changed in those savage and enduring scenes. I performed the first part of my journey on horseback. I afterwards hired a mule as the more sure-footed and least liable to receive injury on these rugged roads. The weather was fine. It was about the middle of the month of August, nearly 2 months after the death of Justine, that miserable epoch from which I dated all my woe. The weight upon my spirit was sensibly lightened as I plunged yet deeper in the ravine of Arve, the immense mountains and precipices that overhung me on every side, the sound of the river raging among the rocks, and the dashing of the waterfalls around spoke of a power mighty as omnipotence. And I ceased to fear or to bend before any being less almighty than that which had created and ruled the elements, here displayed in their most terrific guise. Still, as I ascended higher, the valley assumed a more magnificent and astonishing character. Ruined castles hanging on the precipices of piny mountains, the impetuous Arve, and cottages every here and there peeping forth from among the trees, formed a scene of singular beauty. But it was augmented and rendered sublime by the mighty Alps, whose white and shining pyramids and domes towered above all, as belonging to another earth, the habitations of another race of beings. Oh, I mean, 6 years was a really long time ago, but I mean, I didn't have a boyhood, but I would say that my childhood was quite a lot longer ago than that. Dracula crossover. Frankenstein meets Dracula? It's never been done. I passed the bridge of Pélissier, where the ravine, which the river forms, opened before me, and I began to ascend the mountain that overhangs it. Oh, castles, yeah. No, this is Switzerland or something, so it's like chocolate castles. Soon after, I entered the valley of Chamonix. I don't know if I'm saying it right. Don't tell me, because I don't care. This valley is more wonderful and sublime, but not so beautiful and picturesque as that of Servox, through which I had just passed. The high and snowy mountains were its immediate boundaries, but I saw no more ruined castles and fertile fields. Immense glaciers approached the road. I heard the rumbling thunder of the falling avalanche and marked the smoke of its passage. Mont Blanc, the supreme and magnificent Mont Blanc, raised itself from the surrounding aiguilles, and its tremendous dome overlooked the valley. Aiguille? He passed through a cervix, yeah. He never left the fucking cervix, look at him. Well, you can't look at him, but you know. A tingling, long-lost sense of pleasure often came across me during this journey. Some turn in the road, some new object suddenly perceived and recognized, reminded me of days gone by, and were associated with the light-hearted gaiety of boyhood. The very winds whispered in soothing accents, and maternal nature bade me weep no more. Then again the kindly influence ceased to act. I found myself fettered again to grief and indulging in all the misery of reflection. Then I spurred on my animal, striving so to forget the world, my fears, and more than all, myself. Or, in a more desperate fashion, I alighted and threw myself on the grass, weighed down by horror and despair. Bianca Southern, tremendous. I love that when he feels like a pang of grief, he either makes the mule go faster, or if like a farm girl is watching, he will just leap off the mule and throw himself into the grass to be sad. It's so Kathy Frankenstein. Victor Frankenstein is canonically Kathy's. That's not going to fit the timeline at all. He's Kathy's son, we'll call him that, or grandson, or something. At length, I arrived at the village of Chamonix. Exhaustion succeeded to the extreme fatigue both of body and of mind which I had endured. For a short space of time, I remained at the window, watching the pallid lightnings that played above Mont Blanc, and listening to the rushing of the Arve, which pursued its noisy way beneath. The same lulling sounds acted as a lullaby to my too keen sensations. When I placed my head upon my pillow, sleep crept over me. I felt it as it came, and blessed the giver of oblivion. Distant relative. Yeah. So that was all of chapter 9, was about how sad Victor is and how no one else really has a right to be sad because he's the most sad. And again, all of this is like really good insight into depression and anxiety and all that. Which of course Mary Shelley should know all about. But coming from Victor Frankenstein, the words sound ridiculous. Coming from Mary Shelley, I'd be like, wow, that's pretty flowery language, but those were the times you lived in. That's what's up. You know what's going on. But from Victor Frankenstein, no. Stop jumping off the mule and throwing yourself into the grass to be sad. I should probably read another chapter, but it's pretty long. And I'm thinking that I should conserve my energy for D&D later on today. So I will say thank you very much for joining me, especially because it's so intense. Thank you for joining me on a non-standard time. He's so extra. Yeah, I mean, Kathy and Victor would have a lot to talk about, but they wouldn't be able to because they would both be hurling themselves face down onto the ground or the grass or the bed or whatever, just going, leave me alone. I've been vexed. And they wouldn't actually end up communicating at all. Yeah. Hey, Excuar. Thank you very much for being here. Wash your hands. I'm a doctor. No, neither of them would listen to the other. Absolutely, Danny. They would one up each other from how sad they felt until Kathy just spontaneously died on purpose. And Victor would be like, shit. Well, now I'm the saddest person in the world. Thank you. I will enjoy it. Thanks very much. Okay, see you guys tomorrow, I think. Probably around 6:30. Yeah, Kathy would die just to win, just to prove it. That's what she died of, canonically. All right. See you guys. Be safe. I'm a doctor. Am I? No, not yet.